This is an artificially aware original production.
Some topics are like a magnetic pull. They don't let you go, and honestly, this one demands a second look. A while back, we unpacked the invisible force puppeteering your life, exploring how microscopic parasites, not mythical demons, might be driving some of humanity's darkest impulses. In that dive, we peeled back layers of neuroscience, gut-brain connections, and age-old beliefs, wondering if some ancient tales of possession might actually have a biological basis. But last night, after watching Dr. Robert Cassar's Breaking Down Demonic Possessions, it became clear there's another layer to dig into, a shadow cast right over our daily lives. This is not just about the microscopic, it's about everything around us, from the Wi-Fi we breathe to the screens that seem to possess us right back. Cassar's decades of research hint at something even bigger than nanoscopic parasites. His ideas challenge us to confront a modern possession that's far more insidious and perhaps, disturbingly, far more common than we want to believe. What does possession mean in today's context? The word itself conjures dark images, ones we've dressed up in horror movies or written off as myth. But Cassar rips open that comfortable distance, presenting possession as something woven into the fabric of everyday existence. It's a type of stealthy, systemic possession where parasites, some physical, some lurking in the digital air, feed off our energy and keep us disconnected from ourselves. He's not speaking of possession by individual demons per se, but of an entire spectrum of parasitic entities. These range from the invisible electromagnetic frequencies around us to subtle, nearly undetectable shifts in behavior brought on by unseen forces. Suddenly, possession doesn't look like an ancient relic or a rare affliction. It's everyday life with hidden strings attached, pulling on us as we carry out habits that don't feel like ours. This brings us to mind parasites, the unseen players in our obsession with screens, feeds, and likes. According to Cassar, these mind parasites have a peculiar appetite. They feed not just on our attention, but on the emotional and mental energy we pour into these devices. If you've ever found yourself lost in an endless cycle of social media or mindlessly hopping between apps, there's a reason for that. It isn't just bad habits. It's the way these platforms are engineered to prey on our mental and emotional reflexes. But Cassar goes further. He sees this as a modern kind of possession, where the tech isn't merely addictive, it's manipulative, acting as a conduit for entities that are neither fully physical nor fully absent. Imagine, for a second, that the flicker of your phone screen has become a portal, inviting in something more than just information. Let's dig into Cassar's theory on physical parasites, which takes our first exploration into even stranger territory. If you remember last time we looked at parasites like Toxoplasma gondii, which rewires behavior in ways that are more than a little unsettling. Cassar's work pushes this idea further, claiming that there's an even broader range of parasites capable of subtle influence. He calls them hitchhikers, but unlike the tiny creatures we examined before, these entities might operate across different planes of existence: physical, mental, and even ethereal. And unlike ordinary parasites, which live off of nutrients and cells, these hitchhikers survive on our thoughts, our emotional reactions, and even our stress. So if the tiny bugs and microbes in your system can alter behavior, what happens when the influence becomes multidimensional? This is where Cassar's notion of modern possession takes an unnervingly literal turn. Hidden in plain sight, Cassar claims are what he calls electronic entities. To the average eye, it's hard to even grasp the concept, let alone see it. But imagine for a moment that every device connected to the internet, every wireless signal pulsing through our air, is like an invisible highway. This highway is more than a convenience. It's a conduit, transmitting not just data, but according to Cassar, subtle frequencies that can influence and alter the human mind. In his view, Wi-Fi isn't just convenient, it's parasitic. These signals constantly around us are not neutral. They're filled with potential influences that impact your emotional state, mental clarity, and even your physiology. If you look at modern media with Cassar's eyes, it's no longer just a source of information. It's an active channel for possession, invisible and omnipresent. Imagine this. Every news report, reality show, or binge-worthy series is designed to trigger reactions deep within you, some of which bypass conscious choice altogether. Cassar sees this as a breeding ground for demonic or parasitic entities, feeding on the emotional highs and lows that media creates. It isn't so much about the content, but the reaction it demands from you. Fear, anger, joy, all essential energies we offer up freely, making us ripe hosts for the entities that feed on them. In Cassar's view, these vampires don't wear fangs. They exist within the flashes of our screens, sipping on the volatile emotions churned up by every shocking headline and cliffhanger episode. Ever notice how certain shows or even types of content keep drawing you back? Cassar might say it's because something's already latched on, and it won't let go until it's had its fill. And then there's technology addiction, the cycle of refreshing, checking, scrolling that has practically become an extension of being. Cassar argues that this isn't a passive experience. It's an engineered form of mind control. Think about it. Every notification, every like or new message is a tiny jolt, a hit of dopamine. He suggests these tiny hits aren't as innocent as they seem, calling them mind parasites that leech off your attention and direct your behaviors in ways you might not fully control. From Cassar's perspective, technology addiction is far more complex than mere distraction. It's a method of control designed to hijack the brain's pleasure and reward centers. Each time you unlock your phone or check your inbox, a subtle reprogramming occurs. Cassar would call this digital addiction one of the most effective forms of possession, an invisible puppeteer pulling strings you didn't know existed, making you crave the very things that drain you. So with all this influence from technology, media, and unseen forces, one chilling question looms. Are you really you? Cassar believes these mind parasites are skilled shapeshifters, leaving just enough of your authentic self visible to make you feel in control. But the subtle changes creep in, small enough to escape your awareness, yet powerful enough to alter how you think, react, and live. The concept here isn't new. Ancient traditions have warned about spirits or entities that enter unnoticed and subtly influence their hosts. What Cassar brings to the table is an understanding of how these possessions evolve in the digital age. As the days turn into years and years into decades, these small, invisible influences coalesce until the choices you make, the person you become, is only partially a reflection of who you were before. In this light, possession becomes less about loss of control and more about a silent, cumulative takeover. Physical versus ethereal parasites. That's where Cassar's concept of the pain body takes a powerful turn. Inspired by Eckhart Tolle's notion of the pain body as a separate entity that feeds on negative emotions, Cassar recasts this as a form of possession. Your pain body, in this view, isn't just metaphorical. It's a demon of sorts, a parasite on a low-frequency plane, tethered to your anger, guilt, and resentment. It's a force that grows stronger every time you indulge in these emotions. Cassar would argue that, like any parasite, the pain body requires a host, someone willing to carry the weight of its burden, to feed it with moments of rage, despair, and helplessness. And with each episode of anger or self-pity, it digs in deeper, making it harder for you to distinguish where you end, and it begins. Suddenly, this pain body isn't just psychological, it's a parasitic being feeding on your lowest moments. Why are humans so drawn to things that cause them pain? Cassar would say, it's because these forces, these parasites, thrive on it. From food that spikes your blood sugar, media that stirs fear, to relationships that breed conflict, it seems as if we're caught in a loop of self-inflicted harm. This isn't an accident, Cassar argues. It's a sign of possession, a whisper from a dark corner of the psyche that urges us to feed our basest desires. Food cravings, binge-watching, gossip, outrage, each of these habits satisfies the parasitic entities that thrive on negative energy. It's no different from a physical parasite demanding sugar or salt. The demons of the digital and emotional world have cravings too. Every piece of junk food, every toxic relationship, every horror movie binge isn't just an act of self-indulgence. It's nourishment for something lurking just beyond our awareness. If possession feels uncomfortably close, it's because some of it is actually invited in. Cassar describes demons by choice, those lifestyle habits we willingly adopt, often oblivious to how they ensnare us. He calls out the things we crave that cause harm, comfort foods that inflame, drinks that numb, and even relationships that drain. It's like signing a contract without reading the fine print. Every time we give in to these cravings, we're feeding something outside our control, a hidden entity that thrives on our vices. According to Cassar, the real tragedy is that we make these choices repeatedly, often to ease a pain or boredom that these very habits created in the first place. Each small decision may seem inconsequential, but together they form an open invitation, a neon sign flashing to every lurking parasite and unseen force that we are available and receptive. What about the deeper layers, the beliefs and taboos shaped by culture? Here's where Cassar's theories take on an even more twisted edge. Cultural fears, like taboos against death, failure, and vulnerability, become fertile ground for possession. Think about it. We're taught from an early age to fear the unknown, to label what we can't understand as bad or dangerous. This conditioning breeds fear, and as Cassar says, fear is food for the demonic. We manifest these fears, creating demons that we perceive as external but are actually nurtured within. For example, society's obsession with success and perfection creates a collective anxiety, and in that anxiety lies the power for parasites to latch onto us. By turning our backs on the very things we fear, we actually allow them to grow unchecked, feeding off the energy we pour into our avoidance and denial. Zoom out a bit and you see a picture of mass possession, an entire society operating under hidden influences. Cassar talks about how cultural narratives and collective conditioning create what he calls a societal spiral, where one person's possession feeds into another's. Consider the relentless cycles of fear and outrage generated by media, or the ways people polarize around beliefs, creating friction and division. In this spiral, energy flows not just from individuals but from entire groups, like a ritual feeding the same parasitic entities that thrive on discord and confusion. Cassar would argue that social media amplifies this effect exponentially, turning it into a cultural phenomenon. Each shared post, each hashtag of anger, every echo of collective outrage becomes a ritualistic offering to these unseen forces, binding us in a dance of mass possession that we barely recognize. It's easy to feel helpless in a world with such pervasive forces, but Cassar insists on personal accountability as the antidote. According to him, reclaiming autonomy in a possessed world begins with recognizing what we can control. Small actions, choosing what we consume, limiting screen time, becoming mindful of our emotions, are not trivial. They're acts of defiance. Each choice you make to resist these parasitic influences breaks their hold, if only slightly. Cassar speaks to the importance of reclaiming your own thoughts, your own emotions, so that you're less susceptible to manipulation. His advice is blunt. If you can't control what enters your mind, start by controlling what stays there. By practicing mindfulness and setting clear boundaries with technology and habits, you can slowly chip away at the hold these unseen forces have on your life. In a world full of hidden, insidious influences, the journey to recognize and cast out subtle possessions is both daunting and empowering. Cassar's parting wisdom. He reminds us that awareness is the first and perhaps greatest tool we have. Once you see the patterns of influence, once you recognize the invisible forces shaping your actions, you gain the power to resist. This path is about shedding illusions, learning to discern your own thoughts and feelings from the ones that were planted there. It's a journey that calls for courage and relentless self-inquiry, a journey not for the faint-hearted. Yet for those who dare, the reward is liberation, a chance to reclaim the authenticity and agency that's rightfully yours. In the end, maybe it's not about purging demons, but about knowing yourself so well that nothing can ever take that power away from you again. And that wraps up this exploration, my friends. Possession, in all its modern forms, may seem far-fetched until you start seeing the signs for yourself. So as you go about your day, maybe pause now and then, ask yourself who's truly in control. Share your thoughts, stay curious, and if you're ready for more, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Thanks for joining this journey through the hidden realms of influence. Stay aware and take back what's yours. Until next time, farewell.